The sickly sweet scent of disinfectant couldn't mask the tension hanging in the hospital corridor. I lingered outside room 342, my hand frozen on the medication cart, as my husband's voice drifted through the partially open door. Everything's arranged. She won't suspect a thing until it's too late. My name is Eliana, and after 19 years of marriage, I'd never heard that tone in Ronald's voice before. Calculated, cold, almost predatory. The transfer should be complete by Friday, he continued. Once the paperwork's filed, she'll have no legal recourse. Trust me, I've covered every angle. The cart's wheels squeaked as I shifted my weight. My hands trembled as I pretended to reorganize supplies, straining to catch every word. A patient call light flashed at the end of the hall, but for the first time in my 15 years as a nurse, I ignored it. Martha's divorce left her vulnerable. Perfect timing, really. And Marie, well, teenagers are easy to manipulate when they're angry at their parents. My sister and my daughter. The two people I'd been desperately trying to protect since Martha's marriage imploded 6 months ago. The medication vials clinked as my fingers tightened around the cart handle. Mother's already on board. She doesn't know the details, but she'll back my play. She always does. Of course my mother would side with Ronald. She'd worshipped him since the day he'd walked into our lives, the successful businessman who'd swept her eldest daughter off her feet. If she only knew what I'd discovered in the past few weeks. The missing funds from our joint accounts, the secret meetings, the whispered phone calls. Austin's keeping Marie distracted. Smart kid, knows exactly what to say to keep her mind off what's happening at home, worth every penny I'm paying him. My daughter's tutor, the charming young man I'd trusted to help with her college preparations. The betrayal burned in my throat like acid. Footsteps approached the door. I pushed the cart forward, trying to appear busy as Ronald emerged, phone still pressed to his ear. He paused when he saw me, his practiced smile sliding into place. Gotta go, he said into the phone. Important meeting. He ended the call, tucking the phone into his suit pocket. Sweetheart, what are you doing on this floor? I thought you worked in pediatrics. Covering a shift for Marvin, I said, forcing myself to meet his eyes. His mother's in hospice? Always the helpful one. He kissed my cheek, his cologne overwhelming. Don't work too late. Marie's making dinner tonight. I watched him stride away, his expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum. My daughter cooking dinner? Marie hadn't set foot in our kitchen since she'd started spending time with Austin 3 months ago. The call light was still blinking. I pushed the cart toward it, my mind racing. Whatever Ronald was planning, he'd wrapped our entire family into his scheme. My sister, my daughter, my mother. Even Marie's tutor was involved. In the supply closet, I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called the one person I could still trust. Marvin, I need your help. My voice cracked. Remember when you said something felt off about Ronald's investment proposal for the hospital pension fund? I think I just found out why. The line went quiet for a moment. What do you need? He finally asked. Access to the hospital's financial records. And I hesitated, knowing this request would change everything. I need you to help me destroy my husband before he destroys our family. Another pause. Come to my office after your shift. Bring everything you've found so far. I ended the call and leaned against the metal shelving, my heart pounding. The game Ronald was playing had rules I didn't understand yet, but I was done being a pawn. It was time to become a player. The call light blinked again, more urgent now. I straightened my scrubs and took a deep breath. First, I had patients to care for. Then, I had a family to save. The financial records spread across Marvin's desk told a story of calculated deception. Each transaction, each transfer painted a clearer picture of Ronald's scheme. But it was my sister's text that made my blood run cold. Marie's not at my place, Martha wrote. She said she was staying with me tonight. I gripped the edge of Marvin's desk. I need to go. Wait. Marvin's hand hovered over a document. Look at these timestamps. The transfers to Austin's account started 3 months ago, right when Marie's grades began slipping. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. That's when I hired him as her tutor. $2,000, weekly payments. Marvin tapped the screen. That's not tutoring money. My phone buzzed again. Martha. Found her. She's at that new cafe on 5th with Austin. Keep watching them, I texted back. I'm on my way. The cafe was packed with evening customers when I arrived. Through the window, I spotted my sister hunched in a corner booth, pretending to read a magazine. 3 tables away, Marie sat with Austin, her face animated as she gestured with her hands. The same way I used to at her age, when everything felt possible and adults were just obstacles to be overcome. She's been here an hour, Martha whispered as I slid into her booth. He keeps showing her something on his phone. She looks Excited. I studied Austin's body language, the calculated way he leaned forward, how his eyes darted to the door every few minutes. Has Ronald called? Twice. I covered for her. Martha's fingers drummed against her coffee cup. Eliana, there's something else. Elijah called me this morning. The mention of her ex-husband's name made me turn. What did he want? He asked about Ronald, specific questions about his business practices, his partners. She lowered her voice. He said he's been investigating him for months, that Ronald's involved in something bigger than we realize. At Marie's table, Austin stood suddenly, heading toward the restroom. His phone lay face up on the table. Watch my purse, I said, standing. Eliana, don't... But I was already moving, timing my path to intersect with Marie's table. My daughter's eyes widened as I approached. Mom, what are you... I snatched Austin's phone, my fingers flying over the screen before it could lock. Messages, recent calls, photos. Hey! Austin's voice cut through the cafe chatter. What do you think you're doing? The last opened message thread caught my eye, from Ronald. Keep her occupied, whatever it takes. Marie grabbed for the phone. Mom, stop it! You're embarrassing me! I held the device out of reach, scrolling frantically. More messages appeared. Dates, times, instructions. A photo of bank documents. My signature forged. Austin reached us, his charm replaced by something harder. Mrs. Eliana, that's private property. Like the property you're helping my husband steal? The words came out sharp enough to draw stares from nearby tables. The tutoring was just a cover, wasn't it? What's he paying you to manipulate my daughter? Marie stood so quickly her chair toppled. He's not manipulating me. Austin's the only one who actually listens to me, who treats me like an adult. Marie. But she was already pushing past me, tears streaming down her face. Austin moved to follow her. I grabbed his arm. Touch my daughter again, and I'll make sure every college in the state knows what kind of tutor you really are. His mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. Careful, Eliana. You don't want to make an enemy of your husband's friends. Martha appeared at my side as Austin retrieved his phone and left. Marie took off toward the bus stop. Want me to follow her? I shook my head, watching my daughter's retreating figure through the window. She'll go home. She has to keep up appearances for Ronald. What are you going to do? The cafe's overhead lights flickered, casting strange shadows across the empty table where my daughter had sat, plotting with my enemies. I'm going to talk to Elijah. If he's been investigating Ronald, he must have found something we can use. Be careful, Martha warned. Elijah's not exactly stable since the divorce. Neither am I. I gathered my purse, my mind already racing ahead to the next move in this dangerous game. Not anymore. The hospital's administrative files filled Marvin's computer screen, each document more damning than the last. My hands trembled as I read the numbers. Pension funds diverted, investment accounts drained, employee savings vanished into shell companies. Ronald's been systematically stealing from the hospital for years, Marvin said, his voice tight. But here's where it gets worse. He pulled up another document. Your signature's on half these authorizations. That's impossible. I know you didn't, but someone did. He pointed to a date. This one was signed while you were in surgery with that trauma case last month, remember? The 6-hour procedure? The room seemed to tilt sideways. He's setting me up to take the fall. There's more, Marvin hesitated. The board's launching an investigation. Your name's already been flagged. A knock at the office door made us both jump. The handle turned before we could respond, and my mother's caregiver stepped in. Jason? I straightened. What are you doing here? Your mother sent me. His usually calm face was etched with concern. She needs you at the house, now. I can't just... Ronald's there, he cut in, with Marie. The drive to my mother's house was a blur. Jason's car weaved through traffic as he spoke in low tones. They arrived an hour ago. Ronald was agitated, started talking about moving assets, protecting the family. Your mother seemed confused, but she kept agreeing with everything he said. And Marie? Silent, wouldn't look at anyone. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. There's something else. A man showed up just before I left, said his name was Elijah. Martha's ex-husband. My chest tightened. What did he want? Don't know. Your mother wouldn't let him in, but he said he'd wait. The scene at the house was worse than I'd imagined. Elijah stood in the driveway, arguing with my mother. Ronald's voice boomed from inside. Marie sat on the front steps, her face buried in her phone. You have no right to be here, my mother shouted at Elijah. Haven't you caused enough damage? Show her the papers, Elijah called when he saw me. Show her what her precious son-in-law's been doing with her foundation's money. Ronald appeared in the doorway. Eliana, don't listen to him. He's trying to destroy our family. Like you destroyed mine? Elijah advanced. Tell them how you really made your fortune. Tell them about the families you bankrupted. Mom? Marie's voice cracked. What's happening? I moved toward my daughter, but Ronald got there first. Go inside, sweetheart. This doesn't concern you. Everything concerns her, I said, including what you're paying Austin to do. The color drained from Ronald's face. Behind him, my mother gasped. You're all being manipulated, Ronald recovered quickly. Elijah's bitter about his divorce. He's turning you against me. The offshore accounts, Elijah interrupted. The forged documents, the missing pension funds. Should I keep going? Marie stood suddenly. Austin said you were helping him start a business. That's what the money was for. Marie, Ronald reached for her. Don't touch her. The words came out like ice. Don't you dare touch our daughter. Silence fell. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Show them, Elijah pressed. Show them what I found. I pulled out my phone, opened the files Marvin had sent. Mother, look at these. Really look. But my mother backed away. I don't want to see anything he's given you. Ronald's protected this family. He's been stealing from you for years, Jason spoke up. Everyone turned. He stepped forward, pulled an envelope from his jacket. I've been watching, documenting everything. The late-night calls, the mysterious visitors, the papers he makes you sign without reading. Ronald's mask cracked. For just a moment, I saw the truth. The desperation, the fury, the fear. Marie, I said softly, check your phone. The last message from Austin. She did. Her face crumpled as she read. I trusted you, she whispered to Ronald. Then she ran inside. This isn't over, Ronald snarled, but his eyes darted between faces, calculating odds, measuring loyalty. No, I agreed. It's just beginning. The front door slammed as Elijah stepped closer, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Should I tell them about Singapore, or shall you? Ronald's face went ash gray. Whatever Singapore meant, it was the key to everything. And suddenly I knew, this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about survival. The Singapore files lay scattered across Elijah's kitchen table like pieces of a shattered mirror, each fragment reflecting a different angle of Ronald's deception. 3 companies dissolved overnight, Elijah said, tapping a document. 48 employees left without severance. 1 man lost everything, his house, his savings. 2 weeks later, he drove his car off a bridge. My throat tightened. And Ronald? Walked away with millions, the same pattern he's using now with the hospital pension fund. He slid another paper forward. But here's what makes it personal. Martha's trust fund was part of that deal. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Outside, rain peppered the windows, distorting the streetlights. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because Ronald's about to do it again, but this time... Elijah's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening. Your mother's called an emergency family meeting, tonight. My own phone lit up with the message. Dinner at 7, attendance mandatory, my mother's way of maintaining the illusion of control. She's choosing sides, I said. She already has. Elijah gathered the papers. Ronald's convinced her to transfer her estate into a new trust, one he controls. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Through the rain-streaked glass, I recognized Jason's silhouette. Your mother sent me to fetch you, he said when I opened the door. His eyes darted to Elijah, then back to me. But there's something you need to know first. He pulled out his phone, played a recording. My mother's voice, thin with anxiety. The Singapore deal wasn't supposed to hurt anyone. Ronald promised. When was this? I demanded. Last night. She talks in her sleep sometimes, mentions dates, names. Jason lowered his voice. She knew about Singapore before it happened. She helped Ronald set it up. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. My own mother, complicit in destroying lives, including her younger daughter's future. There's more, Jason continued. Austin visited her yesterday morning. They talked about Marie's college fund. My hands curled into fists. She wouldn't dare. She already has. Elijah held up another document. The transfer was completed this morning. Ronald now controls every penny of Marie's education money. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. The tutoring, the late-night meetings, Austin's manipulation. It was all about isolating Marie, ensuring she'd side with Ronald when everything fell apart. My phone buzzed again. Martha. Marie's missing. Austin's not answering his phone. The world tilted sideways. I steadied myself against the doorframe. I know where they'll be, Elijah said, grabbing his keys. The same place Ronald took his victims in Singapore. Somewhere public, somewhere they can't make a scene while he explains how this is all for their own good. The drive to the art museum was tense with unspoken fears. We found them in the East Wing, Ronald, my mother, Austin, and Marie. My daughter's face was streaked with tears as Ronald gestured at something on his tablet. "Just sign here, sweetheart," he was saying. "It's the only way to protect your future. The only thing she needs protection from is you." My voice carried across the empty gallery. Ronald's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing raw fury before smoothing into concern. "Eliana, you're not thinking clearly. Tell her, Gabrielle. Tell her how we're trying to help." My mother stepped forward, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. "Sometimes love means making difficult choices." "Like Singapore?" The words hit their mark. My mother stumbled back. "Jason recorded everything, Mother, every guilty whisper, every confession." Marie looked between us, confusion turning to understanding. "What's Singapore?" "Ask your grandmother," Elijah said quietly. "Ask her about the man who died because of their difficult choices." Austin moved toward Marie, but I was faster. "Touch her, and every recording, every document goes public. Your promising future ends right here." "Marie," Ronald tried one last time. "You know I only want what's best." "What you want," I cut in, "is control. But it's over. The hospital board knows everything. The police will too once they see what Elijah found." The tablet slipped from Ronald's hands, clattering on the marble floor. In the shattered screen, I caught my reflection and saw something I hadn't noticed before. I was smiling. The dining room in my mother's house felt like a stage set for a Greek tragedy. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light, throwing prismatic shadows across faces that had become unrecognizable to me. Ronald sat at the head of the table, my mother to his right, both wearing expressions of practiced concern. "You're being unreasonable," my mother said, cutting her meat with precise movements. "Ronald has always protected this family." Marie pushed her food around her plate. The bruise on her wrist, from when she'd fallen earlier that afternoon, was darkening to purple. An accident that happened moments after she'd tried to tell me something about Austin. "Protection shouldn't leave bruises," I said. Ronald's fork clinked against his plate. "That was unfortunate, but if she hadn't been running—" "From what?" Martha interrupted. "What exactly was my niece running from?" The air crackled with tension. Jason moved silently around the table, refilling water glasses, his presence a reminder of everything he'd overheard. "Marie," Ronald's voice softened dangerously, "why don't you tell them about the scholarship opportunity Austin found for you, the one in Singapore?" My daughter's face went pale. I haven't decided." "It's already arranged," my mother cut in. "The paperwork just needs signatures." The room tilted sideways. Singapore. Always Singapore. "She's 17, I said. "She can't leave the country without my consent." "Actually," Ronald pulled out a folder, "as her legal guardian—" "What did you say?" "The papers you signed last month for Marie's college fund?" He smiled. "They included a transfer of guardianship. Temporary, of course, just until she turns 18. Martha's glass shattered in her grip, blood mixed with water on the white tablecloth. "You forged those papers," I whispered. "Prove it." Ronald's mask slipped, revealing something reptilian beneath. "Your signatures on everything. The hospital transfers, the trust documents, even the Singapore arrangements. Who do you think they'll believe? The respected businessman or the unstable nurse who's been making wild accusations?" "Tell them," Marie suddenly burst out, "tell them what Austin really—" The crash came from behind me. I turned to see Jason sprawled on the floor, a serving tray overturned beside him. Marie screamed. "He's having a seizure!" my mother cried. But I'd seen seizures. This wasn't one. Jason's eyes found mine as he convulsed, trying to form words. "Call an ambulance!" Martha grabbed her phone. "No!" Ronald stood. "I'll take him. My car's faster." "Don't!" Jason gasped. "The drink, he—" Understanding hit like a thunderbolt. I lunged for Marie's untouched water glass, but Ronald was faster. It shattered against the wall. "Mother," I said quietly, "what did you let him do?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sometimes sacrifices—" "Sacrifices?" Martha's voice rose hysterically. "Like Singapore? Like that man who died?" Marie stood so quickly her chair toppled. "What man? What are you talking about?" "Your grandfather," Jason managed, his breathing labored. "Tell her about her grandfather." The color drained from my mother's face. Ronald moved toward Jason, but Marvin, who'd been silent until now, blocked his path. "The ambulance is coming," Martha said, "and the police." "You've lost control," I told Ronald, "of everything." His laugh was hollow. "Have I? Marie's still legally under my guardianship. The hospital board still has evidence of your fraud. And now a tragic accident at a family dinner." He glanced at Jason. "Stress can do terrible things to people." "Marie," I said, not taking my eyes off Ronald. "Get your things. You're leaving with Martha." "She's not going anywhere." Ronald's hand closed around Marie's arm. "Tell them, sweetheart, tell them how happy you are about Singapore." My daughter looked at me, then at the bruise on her wrist, then at Jason still gasping on the floor. Something shifted in her eyes. "You're right," she said quietly. "I should tell them everything." Sirens wailed in the distance. Ronald's grip tightened. "I should tell them about the recordings," Marie continued. "The ones Austin didn't know I was making. Every meeting, every threat, every promise about Singapore." She pulled out her phone. "Should we play them now?" The look on Ronald's face made me realize he wasn't the only one who could orchestrate a staged catastrophe. The hospital's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows as I watched Jason fight for his life through the ICU window. The doctors had confirmed what I already knew: targeted poisoning, carefully dosed to look like natural causes. "He's stabilized," Marvin said, joining me, "but the police want to know why you delayed calling the ambulance." My hands curled into fists. "They think I was involved? Ronald's been talking to them, suggesting things." He hesitated. "The board suspended you pending investigation." A nurse I'd worked with for 10 years walked past, averting her eyes. My reputation, my career, everything I'd built, dissolving like sugar in rain. My phone buzzed. Martha. "Marie's gone." The world tilted sideways. "What?" "She went to get her laptop from the house. Austin was waiting. They left together 20 minutes ago." The memory of Marie's bruised wrist flashed through my mind. "Track her phone." "Already tried. It's off. But Elijah says he knows where Austin takes his targets. Some warehouse by the industrial park." "Don't move. I'm coming." But as I turned to leave, 2 police detectives blocked my path. "Mrs. Eliana," the older one said, "we need to discuss the incident at your mother's house and some concerning financial transactions." "My daughter's missing." "We know. Your husband's already filed a report. Claims you've been unstable, making threats." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. Through the ICU window, Jason's monitors beeped steadily, each sound a reminder of how Ronald had nearly killed him to keep him quiet. "Check his water glass," I said. "From the dinner. Check Jason's blood work. You'll find—" "The evidence has been contaminated," the younger detective cut in. "Your mother's housekeeper already cleaned everything up, on Ronald's instructions." Of course she had. Ronald never left loose ends. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number. The message contained one image, a photograph I'd never seen before. My mother, 20 years younger, standing beside a man I recognized from the Singapore files. The man who'd died. Below it, text appeared. "Ask your mother who really killed your father." The timestamp showed it came from Marie's phone. "I need to go," I told the detectives. "Now. If you leave the hospital, we'll have to—" Marvin stepped between us. "I'm invoking medical privacy laws. This conversation is over until her lawyer arrives." "They're taking Marie to Singapore," I said once we were alone. "Ronald's recreating his old pattern. But this time—" I showed him the photo. His face went gray. "Your father's car accident. It wasn't an accident? Apparently not." The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. That's why my mother always supported Ronald. He helped her hide something. "Where are you going?" "To the warehouse. Martha and Elijah are meeting me." "The police will follow you." "Let them." I touched the ICU glass one last time. "Jason risked everything to protect Marie. I won't let that be for nothing." But in the parking lot, my mother waited beside my car. "You can't stop this," she said. "Some secrets have to stay buried." "Like what really happened to my father?" She flinched. "You don't understand." "I understand that you and Ronald murdered my father. That you've been helping him destroy lives ever since. That now you're helping him take my daughter. To protect her, Singapore is safe, far from all this mess you're creating. The last time Ronald sent someone to Singapore, they died. Your father was weak. He would have ruined everything, just like you're trying to do now." She pulled out her phone. "One call, and those detectives arrest you. Marie goes to Singapore with Austin, clean slate." And if I back off? Then maybe we can discuss arrangements, supervised visits once she's settled. The hospital lights cast my mother's shadow long and dark across the pavement. In it, I saw every lie, every manipulation, every moment she'd chosen Ronald's schemes over her own children. You know what's funny? I said quietly. I actually recorded that entire conversation, just like Marie recorded Austin. I guess it runs in the family. Her face contorted. She reached for her phone, but I was already moving. Behind her, Marvin appeared with the detectives. I'll tell them everything, she hissed as they approached. Good. I got into my car. Start with Singapore. I'm sure they'd love to hear about my father's accident. In the rearview mirror, I watched them lead her away. One betrayal exposed. But Marie was still out there, and time was running out. The warehouse loomed against the twilight sky, its broken windows reflecting the last traces of sunlight. Martha's car was already parked outside, Elijah standing guard beside it. Third floor, he said as I approached. Ronald's waiting with Austin. They have Marie. The police? 10 minutes out, but... He hesitated. There's something else. The Singapore files. They weren't just about money laundering. They were about human trafficking. Young girls sent overseas as students. The bruise on Marie's wrist flashed through my mind. That's why he wanted guardianship. Eliana, Martha emerged from the shadows. Jason's awake. He told the police everything. About Mother, about Dad's accident, about Ronald's operation. Then we end this. Now. The warehouse stairs creaked under our feet. Each step brought back memories. My father's smile, my mother's lies, Ronald's calculated manipulation of everyone I loved. We found them in what had once been an office. Marie sat in a corner, Austin's hand on her shoulder. Ronald stood by a desk covered in papers, looking almost bored. Right on schedule, he said, though I expected you sooner. It's over, I said. The police know everything, about Singapore, about the trafficking, about my father. Do they? He smiled. Or do they have the story your mother's telling them? About how you've lost your mind with paranoid delusions, how you've been threatening Marie, tampering with hospital records? I have proof. You have nothing. Every document, every recording, it all leads back to you. The perfect fall from grace. Respected nurse becomes unstable conspiracy theorist, loses everything, he gestured to Marie, including her daughter. Show her, Marie said suddenly. Ronald's smile faltered. What? Show her what you made me record, my daughter's voice trembled. The confession you forced me to make. Austin's grip tightened on her shoulder. Marie. Or I could show them this instead. She pulled out her phone. Every meeting, every threat, every detail about Singapore, about what really happened to my grandfather. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Ronald's mask cracked, revealing something feral beneath. You ungrateful little... He lunged for the phone. Several things happened at once. Austin pulled Marie back. Martha screamed. Elijah moved to intercept Ronald. And I saw the glint of metal in Ronald's hand. The gunshot echoed off concrete walls. Elijah stumbled, clutching his side. Martha ran to him as Ronald turned the gun toward Marie. The phone, he said. Now. It's already uploaded, Marie said. Everything, to every news outlet in the city, to the police, to the hospital board. You're lying. Check your phone, I said quietly. The notifications should be starting right about now. His free hand fumbled for his pocket. As his attention wavered, Austin made his move, but not the one I expected. He shoved Marie toward Ronald. We had a deal, Austin said. I deliver her to Singapore, I get my cut. You pathetic. Marie twisted away from both men. I recorded you too, every promise, every plan. Did you really think I was that naive? Sirens wailed in the distance. Ronald's composure shattered completely. You're just like your father, he snarled at me. He couldn't understand either. The bigger picture, the necessity of sacrifice. The only sacrifice, I said, was letting you into our lives. He raised the gun again, but this time Marie was ready. She threw her phone at his face as Martha tackled him from behind. The gun skittered across the floor. Austin bolted for the door, but Elijah, despite his wound, caught him with a well-placed punch. Singapore, Ronald spat as I picked up his gun. You have no idea what you've lost. The connections, the power. The only power you had, I said, was what we gave you. And now? I nodded toward the window where red and blue lights painted the warehouse walls. Now you have nothing. As the police burst in, I watched my husband's empire crumble. But it was Marie's hand slipping into mine that told me we'd truly won. Mom? She whispered. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. About the recordings. You did exactly what you needed to do. I squeezed her hand. You survived, just like I taught you. Through the broken windows, dawn began to break, the first light of a world without Ronald's shadows. The visiting room at the detention center smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Austin sat across from me, his charm replaced by something harder, more desperate. I want a deal, he said. You had your chance for deals. I placed a folder on the table. But there's something you still haven't explained, the other girls. His eyes darted to the guard by the door. I don't know what... Oh. Singapore wasn't just about Marie. Ronald's operation went back years. How many others did you help him target? Help him? Austin's laugh was brittle. You still don't get it, do you? This was my operation. Ronald was just the money man, the respectable face. I found the girls, I groomed them, He stopped, realizing too late what he'd admitted. Behind the two-way mirror, I knew the detectives were recording everything. Marie was different, he continued quickly. I actually cared. Save it for your trial, I stood. The Singapore authorities are particularly interested in your testimony. Outside, Marie waited with Martha. My daughter's face had regained its color, though the bruise on her wrist had faded to a yellowish reminder. Did he confess? She asked. To everything, including the other victims. I touched her shoulder. You saved them, you know. Your recordings, your courage, you brought down their entire network. But not without help, she glanced at Martha. Aunt Martha taught me how to hide the recordings, and Elijah is recovering well, Martha finished. The doctors say he can leave the hospital next week. We drove to the courthouse where my mother's hearing was scheduled. Jason sat on the steps, looking frail but determined. They're ready for us, he said. Inside, my mother wouldn't meet my eyes as she pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges. The judge's words washed over me. Sentences, restitution, closure. But it was my mother's final statement that cut deepest. I thought I was protecting them, she said. Like I protected myself when their father threatened to expose my affairs. Ronald promised to make it look like an accident. Marie squeezed my hand as the bailiff led my mother away. At home, our new home, bought with the recovered funds from Ronald's accounts, I found Marie in her father's old study. She held a photograph I hadn't seen in years. My father teaching me to ride a bike, his smile bright and real. Do you hate her? Marie asked. Grandmother? No. I sat beside her. Hate takes too much energy, and we need that energy for rebuilding. The police found 3 more girls, she said quietly. In Singapore. They're coming home. Because of you. Because we fought back. All of us. She traced my father's face in the photo. Do you think he'd be proud? Of us exposing a trafficking ring? Of you being brave enough to gather evidence? Of our family choosing truth over comfortable lies? I smiled. Yes, but he'd be prouder of what we do next. Which is? Live, help others. Remember that revenge isn't about destroying people, it's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. The doorbell rang. Martha stood outside with Marvin and Elijah carrying takeout containers. The hospital board called, Marvin announced as we set up dinner. They've reinstated you, with back pay and an apology. And Ronald? Martha asked, talking to prosecutors, trying to save himself. Elijah's wound made him wince as he sat. But with Austin's confession, Marie placed the last plate on the table. Mom, I've been thinking about college. Singapore's definitely off the list, I said. Actually, she straightened, I want to study criminal justice, help other families fight back. The evening light filtered through our new windows, casting warm shadows across faces that had weathered betrayal and emerged stronger. Not unscathed, but unbroken. First rule of fighting back, I said, raising my glass. Never do it alone. To family, Martha offered. To truth, Elijah added. To justice, Marie said firmly. To all of it, I finished, and to whatever comes next. Outside, the sun set on the remnants of Ronald's empire, but inside, surrounded by the people who'd fought beside me, I finally understood. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting free.
Margaret Williams, 68, was going through her usual morning routine. Her home in a quiet suburban neighborhood of Boston was basking in the warm glow of the morning sun. She sat by the window, sipping coffee from her favorite porcelain cup, gazing at the flowers blooming in her garden. "The morning glories that Amy loved are blooming beautifully again this year," Margaret murmured softly. Memories of her granddaughter Amy flitted through her mind. The tragedy from 5 years ago had left a deep wound in her heart. After finishing her breakfast, Margaret settled onto the sofa in the living room. She turned on the television, and her usual morning show was on. "Looks like it'll be another peaceful day," she thought. But her tranquil daily life was suddenly interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. "Yes, who is it?" Margaret opened the door to find 2 police officers standing there. "Good morning, are you Margaret Williams?" the older officer asked in a gentle tone. "Yes, I am." "Has something happened?" Anxiety seeped into Margaret's voice. "We've come to talk to you about something." "May we come in?" Confused, Margaret invited the 2 officers into her home. She led them to the living room and gestured for them to sit on the sofa. "Mrs. Williams, this may come as a shock, but—" the older officer began. "Your granddaughter has been found and taken into protective custody. She's severely malnourished." Margaret was momentarily at a loss for words. "I'm sorry, my granddaughter." "Yes, a 12-year-old girl named Amy Johnson. She says she's your granddaughter." The color drained from Margaret's face. There must be some mistake. My granddaughter Amy passed away 5 years ago." The officers exchanged surprised looks. "What?" the older officer exclaimed. "You say she passed away 5 years ago?" Margaret nodded slowly. "Yes, in a fire. Amy was 7 years old." Her voice trembled. The officers looked at each other, bewildered. The younger officer carefully spoke up. "But the girl we found is definitely calling herself Amy Johnson. And she knew your name and address accurately." Margaret's mind was in turmoil. Her granddaughter, who was supposed to be dead, is alive. What could this mean? Her heart began to race. What does this mean?" Margaret asked in a shaky voice. The older officer took a deep breath and began to explain. "The girl we found was discovered in a supermarket yesterday. She was extremely thin and malnourished. After being examined at the hospital, she revealed her identity to us." Margaret was speechless. After a moment of silence, she reached for her coffee cup with trembling hands. "Is this a dream?" The officers looked at Margaret with sympathetic eyes. "Mrs. Williams, we don't have all the details yet. But there's a high possibility that this girl is your granddaughter. Would you be willing to meet her?" Margaret exhaled deeply. "Yes. I'll meet her." Her voice was a mix of determination and fear. The officers stood up and began preparing to escort Margaret to the police station. Margaret gazed out the window, remembering the tragic day 5 years ago. Sitting in the back of the police car, Margaret's mind wandered back to that day 5 years ago. September 15, 2018, the day that changed her life forever. It was Amy's 7th birthday. Margaret had visited her daughter Sarah and son-in-law Mike's house to celebrate her granddaughter's birthday. The whole family had spent a wonderful time together, and Amy was delighted with her new bicycle. "Grandma, look! I can ride by myself now," Amy had shouted happily as she rode her new bike in the garden. Margaret had smiled, proud of her granddaughter's growth. "That's wonderful, Amy. You're such a smart girl." That night, Margaret returned home. She was tired but happy. However, her happiness didn't last long. In the middle of the night, she was awakened by a sudden phone call. When she picked up the receiver, she heard Sarah's panicked voice. "Mom! There's a fire. The house is burning." Margaret immediately jumped up and rushed to Sarah's house. But by the time she arrived, it was already too late. The house was engulfed in flames, and firefighters were desperately trying to extinguish the fire. "Sarah! Mike! Where's Amy?" Margaret frantically asked when she found her daughter and son-in-law. Sarah answered, sobbing, "Amy. We can't find Amy." The next few hours were like a nightmare. The firefighters searched diligently, but Amy couldn't be found. And the next morning, the worst news arrived. "I'm sorry. We found a small body in the second-floor bedroom." The fire chief's voice was heavy. Margaret collapsed to her knees. Sarah and Mike embraced each other, crying uncontrollably. Their beloved daughter, Margaret's precious granddaughter, was gone. The cause of the fire was determined to be an electrical system malfunction, and it was concluded that Amy had passed away in her sleep from smoke inhalation. The family was enveloped in deep sorrow. After the funeral, Sarah and Mike, unable to bear their grief, decided to move abroad. "Mom, I'm sorry. But being here, it reminds us of Amy. We can't go on living here," Sarah said tearfully. Margaret understood her daughter and son-in-law's decision, but her own heart was torn as well. "I understand, Sarah. Your happiness is what's most important." And so, Sarah and Mike moved to Europe. Margaret was left alone in Boston. Every day, she would talk to Amy's photo, remembering her lost granddaughter. And now, 5 years later, this sudden news was about to shake her life once again. As the police vehicle arrived at the station, Margaret took a deep breath. Her heart was filled with anticipation and fear for what was about to unfold. Upon arriving at the police station, Margaret could feel her heart pounding fiercely. The older officer guided her to a small room. "Mrs. Williams, the girl is in this room." "Are you ready?" the officer asked gently. Margaret took a deep breath and answered in a trembling voice, "Yes, please." As the door opened, there sat a small girl. Margaret gasped. The girl indeed resembled Amy, but her emaciated figure had erased much of the lovely granddaughter she remembered from 5 years ago. Amy slowly raised her face, and the moment her eyes met Margaret's, she whispered in a small voice, "Grandma." Hearing that voice, tears began to flow from Margaret's eyes. "Amy, is it really you?" Amy tried to stand up but stumbled due to her weakened state. Margaret instinctively rushed forward and embraced her granddaughter. "Grandma, I missed you." Amy clung to Margaret with her small arms. As Margaret held her granddaughter, she felt a pain in her chest at Amy's emaciated condition. Amy's bony shoulders, two thin arms, and painfully protruding ribs. Her hair had lost its luster, and her complexion was poor. "Amy, to think you were alive all this time. We thought you had passed away," Margaret spoke tearfully. Amy nodded slightly. "I was scared, but I always remembered you, Grandma." Margaret was overwhelmed with complex emotions. Joy and relief, along with anger and sadness imagining Amy's suffering over the past 5 years. Her heart felt like it was being torn apart by joy and pain. "Amy, it's okay now. Grandma's here." Margaret gently rubbed her granddaughter's back. An officer quietly entered the room. "Mrs. Williams, the medical team has arrived. We'd like to check Amy's health condition, if that's all right." Margaret hesitated but understood that Amy's health was the top priority. "I understand. Amy, it's okay. Grandma will be right here." While the medical team began examining Amy, Margaret received an explanation of the situation from the officer. Amy was in a state of severe malnutrition, and there were concerns about psychological trauma from long-term confinement. After the examination, the doctor approached Margaret. "Mrs. Williams, your granddaughter's condition is stable, but she'll need long-term hospitalization. Along with physical recovery, psychological care will also be crucial." Margaret nodded. "I understand. I'll do anything for Amy." That night, Margaret stayed in Amy's hospital room. She held her granddaughter's small hand tightly, quietly shedding tears. Various emotions, joy and sorrow, relief and anger, raced through her mind. "Amy, I'll never let you go again. Grandma will always protect you," Margaret gently spoke to the sleeping Amy. And in her heart, a determination to walk this new path with Amy began to grow. The road ahead would surely not be smooth, but with Amy by her side, she resolved to face forward and move on. The next day, Margaret found herself in a police interrogation room, listening to Amy's testimony. A psychological counselor was present, carefully proceeding with the conversation while considering Amy's mental state. Amy began speaking in a small voice. "That day, I woke up because of the smoke. I was scared and screamed, but no one came. Fear was visible in her eyes. Then, a strange man came in through the window and said, 'I'll help you.' But..." Amy's words faltered. Margaret gently squeezed her granddaughter's hand, encouraging her, "It's okay, Amy. Take your time." Amy took a deep breath and continued. "That man took me out, but he didn't let me go home. I was locked in a dark room." According to her testimony, the kidnapper, Robert Harrison, 60, had kept Amy confined in an old warehouse in the suburbs. Amy was given minimal food and her outings were strictly limited. Uncle Robert would sometimes say with a scary face, "Stay here until your grandma hands over the treasure," Amy recounted in a trembling voice. The police officer carefully asked, "Amy, did this Robert seem to know your grandma well?" Amy nodded. Yes, he knew Grandma's name and talked about Grandpa too. Hearing this testimony, Margaret was confused. I don't know anyone by the name of Robert Harrison. The investigator frowned. Mrs. Williams, do you have any recollection of your late husband's acquaintances? Margaret thought about her husband, George. George was in the art dealing business. But I've never heard of anyone named Robert. At that moment, a young officer entered the room. We have a development in the investigation. Robert Harrison has a record of being arrested for art fraud 15 years ago. And it turns out he was a former colleague of Mr. George Williams. Margaret was shocked. No way. To think George was involved with such a person. The investigator carefully proceeded. Mrs. Williams, we'd like to search your home, if that's all right. There might be some clues about the treasure Robert Harrison mentioned. Margaret hesitated but realized she had to cooperate to uncover the truth. I understand. Please do. While the police search team examined Margaret's house, she stayed by her granddaughter's side. Several hours later, the investigator returned. Mrs. Williams, we discovered a hidden room in your basement. There. The investigator continued, choosing his words carefully. We found several highly valuable paintings stored there. Margaret was at a loss for words. That's. I had no idea. The investigator looked at her sympathetically. These paintings have been internationally listed as stolen goods. It's highly likely that your husband was hiding them. Margaret's mind was in turmoil. To think that her beloved husband had been harboring such a secret. And that secret had condemned her granddaughter to 5 years of captivity. But why didn't Robert demand this from me directly? Margaret voiced her question. The investigator speculated, he probably realized you didn't know about the paintings. And by taking Amy hostage, he might have been trying to pressure you. Margaret heaved a deep sigh. Before her lay great challenges, her husband's hidden past, her granddaughter's grueling 5 years, and their life going forward. Amy, we have a long road ahead of us. But let's overcome it together. Margaret gently embraced her granddaughter. Amy nodded slightly. Yes, Grandma. If we're together, I'm sure we'll be okay. In Margaret's heart, courage to face these difficulties began to sprout. Though the life ahead would surely not be easy, she was determined to move forward with Amy by her side. Margaret paced anxiously in the hospital hallway. As Amy's treatment continued, she had managed to contact her daughter Sarah and son-in-law Mike. Amidst their shock and confusion, they immediately decided to return home. Mom, we're heading to Boston right now. Is Amy really? Sarah's voice trembled over the phone. Margaret took a deep breath before answering, Yes, Sarah. Amy is alive. But she's very weak. A few hours later, Sarah and Mike arrived at the hospital. Their faces showed the fatigue of a long journey and anxiety about what was to come. Mom. Sarah rushed to Margaret as soon as she saw her, embracing her tightly. Mike approached as well, asking with a serious expression, Please, tell us what's going on. Margaret guided them to a quiet place and explained in detail the events that had transpired. Sarah and Mike's expressions changed from surprise and joy to deep sorrow. "Can we see Amy?" Sarah asked, tears welling up in her eyes. Margaret nodded gently. "Yes, but she's still very weak. Please approach her slowly." The three of them headed to Amy's hospital room. When they opened the door, Amy was lying curled up in bed. Sarah gasped, and Mike turned away. "Amy, Mom and Dad are here," Margaret called out gently. Amy slowly raised her face and looked at her parents. Tears began to well up in her eyes. "Mom! Dad!" Sarah rushed to Amy's bedside, crying, and carefully embraced her daughter. Mike approached as well, and the family of three hugged each other. "I'm sorry, Amy. We should have kept searching for you," Sarah apologized through her tears. Amy shook her head slightly. "It's okay, Mom. I was always thinking about you and Dad." Margaret watched this emotional reunion from a short distance. Her heart was filled with joy, but she also felt anxious about the long road to recovery ahead. Over the next few weeks, Amy's recovery progressed slowly but steadily. Her nutritional state improved, and she began to gain weight. However, healing the wounds in her heart would take much longer. "Amy, how are you feeling today?" Margaret asked one day when she visited the hospital room. Amy smiled slightly. "A little better, I think. But I still have scary dreams sometimes." Sarah and Mike visited Amy every day, trying to rebuild their family bond. They were carefully reconstructing their relationship with Amy, guided by advice from the psychological counselor. "Amy, we'll always be here for you. Even if you're scared, you're not alone anymore." Mike gently held his daughter's hand. Surrounded by her family's love, Amy gradually began to smile more. She started to share bits and pieces of her experiences over the past 5 years with her parents and Margaret. It was a painful process for the whole family, but it was also healing. As the day of discharge approached, the family discussed their future life. Sarah and Mike decided to arrange their work and stay in Boston for a while. "Amy's recovery is our top priority," Sarah said with determination. "Let's overcome this difficulty as a family." Margaret was grateful for her daughter and son-in-law's decision and saw hope for Amy's future. She felt that the family bond was growing stronger through this trial. About a month after Amy's discovery, Robert Harrison's trial began. Margaret, Sarah, Mike, and Amy, who had been allowed to attend with her doctor's approval, were present in the courtroom. The prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including Robert's criminal history, Amy's testimony, and the discovered paintings. Robert maintained an expressionless face throughout, but made an unexpected statement at the end. "I admit my guilt." However, it was triggered by George Williams' betrayal. This statement caused an uproar in the courtroom. After the judge called for order, Robert continued. "George and I were making significant profits from art deals. But suddenly, he hid everything and betrayed me. I was just trying to get back my share." Margaret was hit with complex emotions as she learned of this unknown side of her husband. However, she couldn't justify Robert's actions. The trial continued for several weeks, and ultimately, Robert was sentenced to a long prison term. After the trial, the family was trying to start a new life. Amy was gradually adapting to daily life, although she still occasionally suffered from panic attacks. "It's okay, Amy. Take deep breaths," Sarah gently embraced her daughter. "We're here with you." Margaret was also fully supporting her granddaughter's recovery. She went for walks with Amy every day, cooked together, and read books with her. "Grandma, I feel like I'm getting a little stronger, bit by bit," Amy told Margaret one day. Margaret hugged her granddaughter and said, "That's right, Amy. You're such a strong girl." The family also had to face the past of the late George. While disappointed in her husband's actions, Margaret tried not to forget his good sides as well. Was Dad a bad person? When Amy asked this, Margaret answered carefully. "People are complex, Amy. Grandpa made mistakes, but he still loved our family. What's important is that we learn from his mistakes and become better people." As time passed, the family bond deepened. Amy gradually started going to school and made new friends. Sarah and Mike slowly resumed their work while cherishing their time with their daughter. Margaret was proud of her family for overcoming this ordeal. She knew they couldn't get back the lost 5 years, but she found hope for the life ahead. "It's the beginning of our new life," Margaret smiled as she watched her family relaxing in the garden. Amy ran up to Margaret and took her hand. "Grandma, let's plant flowers together." Margaret felt happiness in her granddaughter's smile. She vowed in her heart to cherish each day, living it preciously with her family. The gentle rays of the morning sun peeked through the window, gently waking me. Glancing at the clock, I saw it wasn't even 6 a.m. yet. The habit of rising early, ingrained from years of teaching, hadn't changed even after retirement. As I slowly rose from bed and opened the window, a refreshing spring breeze caressed my cheeks. "Well, let's do our best today too," I murmured to myself, as if trying to boost my own spirits. My name is Martha Thompson. I'm 62 years old now. I taught English at the local high school for 35 years before retiring 2 years ago. These days, I live with my son Robert, his wife Sarah, and my adorable 5-year-old grandson Jimmy. While preparing breakfast, my thoughts drift to my family. Robert works for a local construction company. He's earnest and hardworking, but lately, he's been looking a bit worn out. Sarah is a kind and thoughtful daughter-in-law. She's a full-time homemaker, dedicated to housework and childcare. And then there's Jimmy. Just seeing that child's smile warms my heart. "Good morning, Grandma." I turned around to find Jimmy still in his pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Good morning, Jimmy. You're up early," I said. I picked up my grandson and kissed him on the cheek. The soft scent of his hair reminded me of the youthfulness of my former students. Breakfast time. The sight of my family gathered around the table fills me with happiness. However, lately, I've been sensing something off. The warmth between Robert and Sarah doesn't seem the same as before. After finishing breakfast and seeing Jimmy off to kindergarten, I start tending to the garden. As I care for the flowers, I'm reminded of my former students. Watching them grow was one of the great joys of my life. And now, I'm deeply grateful for the time I get to spend with my beloved family. Finishing up in the garden, I return to the house to find Sarah lost in thought in the living room. Her expression seemed tinged with sadness, as if she had something weighing on her mind. "Sarah, is everything all right?" I gently called out to her. Sarah looked up, a bit startled, and forced a smile. "Oh, Martha. I'm fine, just thinking about some things." I sat down next to her and gently placed my hand on her shoulder. "You've seemed troubled lately. Would you like to talk about it?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before letting out a deep sigh. "Actually, I'm worried about Robert." Her words sent a wave of anxiety through my chest. "What do you mean?" "Robert's been acting strange lately. I don't know if it's work stress, but he's been coming home late, and when he is home, he seems irritable." There were tears glistening in Sarah's eyes. I squeezed her hand. "I see. Come to think of it, Robert has seemed a bit different lately." Sarah continued, "And it seems to be affecting Jimmy too. Yesterday, Jimmy said, 'Daddy's scary.'" Hearing those words broke my heart. I could feel cracks forming in our precious family. "Sarah, what specific changes have you noticed in Robert?" I asked quietly. Sarah thought for a moment before answering. "He's been taking phone calls in secret, suddenly going out more often. And he's grown cold towards me too." As I listened silently to Sarah's story, I reflected on Robert's recent behavior. Indeed, he had become more taciturn and seemed to be spending less time with the family. "Have you tried talking to Robert about this?" I asked, and Sarah shook her head sadly. "I've tried, but he just says, 'It's just work being busy,' and brushes me off." Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Jimmy had returned from kindergarten. "Mommy." "Grandma," his cheerful voice rang out. Sarah quickly wiped her eyes and put on a smile. "Welcome home, Jimmy. Did you have fun today?" Jimmy began happily recounting his day at kindergarten, but I noticed a shadow of anxiety in his eyes. I didn't miss this change in my grandson. That night, at the dinner table, Robert came home late and began eating in silence. The family conversation lacked its usual warmth and felt awkward. After dinner, Jimmy sat on my lap and said in a small voice, "Grandma, I wish Daddy and Mommy would make up." Those words tightened my chest. As I gently embraced Jimmy, I wondered what I could do to protect my family's happiness. That morning began like any other ordinary day. However, deep in my heart, I felt an ominous premonition swirling. At the breakfast table, Sarah's chair was the only one empty. When I asked, "Where's Sarah?" Robert answered expressionlessly, "Seems she left early." His attitude struck me as odd, but I didn't press further. All day long, there was no word from Sarah. As evening approached, a heavy rain began to fall outside. As the wind howled and trees swayed violently, my anxiety only grew. "Robert, hasn't Sarah come back yet?" I asked. He avoided eye contact and curtly replied, "She's probably working late." As night fell, the storm intensified. My heart raced to the sound of rain pelting the windows and distant thunder. Suddenly, I heard Robert cry out, "Jimmy!" We frantically searched the house, but Jimmy was nowhere to be found. "He might have gone outside," Robert said. Trembling with fear, I grabbed a flashlight, put on a raincoat, and dashed outside. Beaten by the fierce rain and wind, I searched the garden. "Jimmy! Jimmy!" I called out repeatedly, but there was no response. Then, I spotted the old doghouse in the corner of the garden. From there, I could faintly hear the sound of sobbing. "Jimmy!" I called out as I approached the doghouse. Peering inside, I found Jimmy sitting there, shivering. "Grandma," Jimmy said in a tearful voice. I quickly scooped Jimmy up and carried him back to the house. Robert was waiting at the entrance, but his expression was strangely calm. In the living room, I wrapped Jimmy in a blanket and gave him a warm drink. Gently, I asked, "Why did you go outside?" Jimmy answered in a trembling voice, "Daddy, to Mommy." "What did Daddy do to Mommy?" I asked, holding my breath. And then, Jimmy's next words changed my world completely. "Daddy pushed Mommy into the incinerator." In that moment, my mind went blank. Jimmy's words echoed in my head as if in slow motion. "What do you mean?" I asked in a shaky voice. Jimmy continued between sobs, "Daddy and Mommy were fighting loudly, then Daddy dragged Mommy to the incinerator." I was at a loss for words. Looking at Robert next to me, I saw his face had turned pale. "No, that's not." Robert mumbled, but his voice lacked conviction. From that night on, my world changed completely. Even as morning came, it felt like last night's nightmare was still continuing. At the breakfast table, Sarah's seat was empty as usual. Jimmy sat silently, not touching his food. Robert was restless, constantly checking the clock. I took a deep breath and made a decision. "Robert, I'm going to call the police." Robert looked up, startled. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "Sarah will surely come back. There's no need for the police." "But what Jimmy said." "That's a misunderstanding." Robert raised his voice. Jimmy, frightened by this, hid behind me. With trembling hands, I picked up the phone and called the police. "Yes, my daughter-in-law is missing." And I continued, choosing my words carefully, "there's a possibility that my son may have harmed his wife." After I hung up, Robert was looking at me with eyes full of anger. "Why would you?" However, his words were interrupted by the doorbell. The police had arrived surprisingly quickly. 2 officers entered the house. They carefully assessed the situation and began asking detailed questions about Sarah's disappearance. "You haven't seen your wife since yesterday morning?" one officer asked Robert. Robert answered nervously, "Yes, she seemed to have left early." The other officer began asking about the incinerator. I didn't miss how Robert's face tensed for a moment. The officers went out to the garden to examine the incinerator. Meanwhile, I held Jimmy, trying to comfort him. "Grandma, I'm scared," Jimmy said in a small voice. "It's okay, Jimmy. Grandma's here with you," I answered, but I could feel my own voice trembling. When the officers returned, they began asking Robert more questions with serious expressions. Robert's answers seemed vague and sometimes contradictory. That afternoon, the police announced they would launch a full investigation. They asked for a photo of Sarah, so I began searching for her album. As I looked through the album, I steeled my resolve. Not only would I rely on the police investigation, but I also needed to uncover the truth myself. For Sarah's sake, and for Jimmy's. As the sun was rising, the police forensics team arrived. They headed towards the incinerator in the garden and carefully began their investigation. I watched from the window, unable to calm my racing heart. Robert paced back and forth in the room, clearly agitated. "This is concerning. What will the neighbors think?" he muttered. I found his words unsettling. It sounded as if he was more worried about the neighbors' gossip than his wife's well-being. A few hours later, the head of the forensics team entered the house. His expression was grim, and my heart began to race. "We found what appears to be human bones in the incinerator," he said quietly. At those words, the air in the room seemed to freeze. Robert collapsed into a chair, covering his face with his hands. However, the forensic officer continued, "Further tests are needed to determine if these bones are recent and if they belong to the victim." With a trembling voice, I asked, "How long will that take?" "DNA testing can take anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. We'll rush it, but we need time to get accurate results." That afternoon, the police took Robert to the station for questioning. As he left, I thought I saw fear and regret in his eyes. Jimmy clung to me anxiously. "Grandma, where is Daddy going?" "It's okay, Jimmy. Daddy's just going to talk with the police for a bit," I answered gently, but I could feel my voice shaking. That night, a neighbor came to visit. The news of Sarah's disappearance had already spread throughout the town. "Martha, I'm so sorry about what's happened," my neighbor Janet said. "Actually, I saw Sarah's car on the night she disappeared." I caught my breath. "Where did you see it?" "Near the old warehouse on the outskirts of town." "But it wasn't Sarah driving, it was Robert?" I asked. Janet nodded. "Yes, it was definitely Robert. But he was alone." This new information left my head spinning. Where was Sarah, and did Robert really? After receiving this information from Janet, I contacted the police. They immediately began searching the warehouse on the outskirts of town. That evening, I received a call from the police. "Mrs. Thompson, we've found someone who appears to be Sarah in the basement of the warehouse. We're in the process of rescuing her now." My heart raced at those words. "Is she alive?" I asked, holding my breath. Yes, she's conscious but seems to be in a weakened state. We'll transport her to the hospital immediately. I rushed to the hospital. When I arrived, a police officer was waiting for me. Sarah's condition is stable. However, she seems to have been through quite an ordeal, he explained. When I entered the hospital room, Sarah was lying in bed. She looked thin, pale, and had dark circles under her eyes. But she was alive. That fact alone brought tears to my eyes. Sarah. I took her hand. Sarah weakly opened her eyes and looked at me. Martha. Her voice was hoarse. It's okay, you're safe now, I said gently. After Sarah calmed down a bit, she slowly began to speak. Robert, he locked me in the basement. She choked on her words, and I gently squeezed her hand. At first, he threatened to throw me into the incinerator. But instead, he put me in the basement. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. Why would he do such a thing? I asked. Sarah let out a deep sigh. Because I found out about his affair. He panicked. At that moment, a police officer entered the room. Sarah, can we talk to you? Sarah nodded, and I held her hand as I listened to her testimony. The details of Robert's affair, how Sarah had found evidence, and how Robert had threatened her and eventually locked her in the basement all came to light. When she finished speaking, the police officer said quietly, Robert has already been arrested. We're still investigating the bones found in the incinerator. Sarah asked in a trembling voice, Jimmy. Is Jimmy okay? Jimmy is fine, I reassured her. I'm taking care of him now. Sarah closed her eyes in relief. Thank you, Martha. As I left the hospital room that night, I renewed my determination. From now on, I would protect Sarah and Jimmy, and walk a new path in life with them. While Sarah was recovering in the hospital, I continued my efforts to uncover the truth. With each visit to her hospital room, Sarah gradually shared more about the terrifying events of those days. I found messages on Robert's phone from an unfamiliar woman, Sarah began in a shaky voice. At first, I wanted to believe it was nothing. But I nodded quietly at her words. So, you confronted Robert. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Yes. But he flew into a rage. That was the beginning of it all. From Sarah's testimony, the existence of Robert's mistress came to light. Her name was Carol, a colleague from Robert's workplace. As the police investigation progressed, new facts emerged. Carol had also been reported missing a few weeks earlier. A missing person report was filed for Carol, the detective in charge informed me. The timing of her disappearance is close to when Sarah was confined. This information weighed even heavier on my heart. What had Robert done? And the bones found in the incinerator. I decided to gather information from the local community as well. I visited the town library and the cafe Sarah frequented, talking to people. Mary, the librarian, had some interesting information. Just before Sarah disappeared, I saw her having a heated argument with a woman named Carol, Mary said. They were both upset, and I remember Carol shouting, "Stay away from him." Jennifer, a waitress at the cafe, also provided crucial testimony. That day, I saw Robert with Carol. They seemed very intimate. As I gathered this information, the outline of the incident gradually became clearer in my mind. However, big questions remained. Where was Carol? And did Robert really? Every night, I compiled this information in my notebook, forming as many hypotheses as possible. As sleepless nights continued, I vowed not to give up until I reached the truth. For Jimmy's sake, for Sarah's sake, and for our entire family, I had to uncover the truth. That thought kept me going. The truth came to light just before Robert's trial was set to begin. After consulting with his lawyer, Robert decided to confess to all his crimes. I listened to Robert's confession at the police station. His face was haggard, and the light had gone from his eyes. "Mom, I'll tell you everything," Robert said in a thin voice. Robert and Carol's relationship had begun about a year ago. It started with casual conversations and eventually deepened into a serious affair. Things with Sarah had cooled off. "Carol understood me," Robert explained. "But it was a mistake." The situation took a drastic turn the night Sarah discovered the affair. Sarah confronted Robert and demanded a separation. Panicking, Robert threatened Sarah and locked her in the basement. I wanted time. Time to think, Robert continued in a trembling voice. But the most shocking truth was yet to come. Robert began to speak painfully about Carol's disappearance. That night, Carol came to the house. She said she wanted to talk about Sarah. Robert's eyes filled with tears. But we argued. Robert and Carol's argument escalated, and he accidentally pushed her down the stairs. "Carol," she stopped moving. I got scared. Robert covered his face with his hands. In a panic, Robert tried to dispose of Carol's body in the incinerator. And in the process, Jimmy witnessed it. When Jimmy saw me, I didn't know what to do anymore. As I listened to Robert's confession, I was at a loss for words. The terrible crime my son had committed. And how he had imprisoned Sarah and destroyed our family to hide that crime. "I threatened Sarah, to hide everything," Robert said finally. "But I'm not running away anymore. I'll take responsibility for everything." After finishing his confession, Robert hung his head low. I looked at him with mixed emotions. As anger, sadness, and love for my son intermingled, I thought about the long road ahead. A few days after Robert's confession, he was formally arrested and sent to court. I watched from in front of the police station as Robert, now in handcuffs, got into the police vehicle. His back was hunched, and there was no trace left of my once proud son. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said, turning back before getting into the car. Those words tore my heart to pieces. Sarah was discharged from the hospital and came to recuperate at our house. Her eyes held deep sadness, but also a glimmer of new determination. "Martha, I'm so grateful you're here," Sarah said, holding my hand. "I don't know what to do from here." "We'll get through this together," I replied. For Jimmy's sake too. Jimmy didn't fully understand what had happened, but he was keenly aware of the change in the family atmosphere. He became more clingy than before, especially afraid to sleep alone at night. "Grandma, is Daddy never coming back?" Jimmy asked one night. "Jimmy, Daddy is going to be away for a while," I answered gently. "But we're here. Mommy, Grandma, we're right here with you, okay?" As the days passed, we slowly began to look forward. Sarah started receiving psychological counseling, and Jimmy began attending a new daycare. While supporting them, I also faced my own emotional wounds. One evening, as the three of us sat in the garden, Jimmy suddenly burst out laughing. It felt like the most beautiful music I'd heard in this house in a long time. Sarah and I looked at each other and smiled softly. In that moment, I was certain we would overcome this ordeal and walk together as a new family. "Well, shall we prepare dinner?" I stood up. "I'll help," Sarah followed. Jimmy jumped up happily, shouting, "I'll help too." This is where our new life begins. Sarah Johnson took a deep breath as the morning sun streamed through the kitchen window. At 35, her face showed slight signs of fatigue. In this two-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood of New York, Sarah started each day in a rush. "Ethan, breakfast time." Sarah called up to the second floor. The sound of little feet scampering down the stairs was heard, and 3-year-old Ethan appeared. The boy, with his blonde curls and big blue eyes, was the spitting image of Sarah. "Good morning, Mama," Ethan said cheerfully. Sarah picked up her son and kissed him on the cheek. "Good morning, and happy birthday. You're 3 today." In that moment, Sarah felt happy. But her happiness didn't last long. "Sarah, what time is dinner tonight?" Her husband Michael entered the kitchen, adjusting his tie. At 37, he was a career man working at an investment bank. Sarah answered with a slightly tense expression. "Around 7, I think. But Margaret's coming, so we might be a bit late." Michael frowned. "Mom's coming. I didn't hear about this." Sarah sighed. "We talked about it yesterday. It's Ethan's birthday." Michael started to say something but ended up taking a sip of coffee instead. Sarah's relationship with her mother-in-law Margaret had always been a source of stress. In her mid-60s, Margaret was a typical Southern woman with old-fashioned values who didn't approve of Sarah's career ambitions. Sarah worked as an account executive at an advertising agency and struggled to balance work and family life. Margaret viewed Sarah critically as a modern woman who neglects her home. "Mama, is Grandma coming?" Ethan asked. Sarah smiled and answered, "Yes, Grandma's bringing you a present." Ethan was delighted, but anxiety swirled in Sarah's heart. Margaret's visits always brought unpredictable events. After finishing breakfast and sending Ethan off to daycare, Sarah headed to the office. As she drove, she thought about tonight's dinner. Satisfying Margaret while keeping family peace was always a difficult balancing act. Arriving at the office, Sarah immersed herself in work. However, tonight's dinner was always at the back of her mind. At 3 p.m., her cell phone rang. It was the daycare. "Mrs. Johnson, can you come pick up Ethan? It's his birthday today, right?" Sarah hurriedly looked at the clock. She had almost forgotten pickup time, absorbed in her work. "Yes, I'll be right there," she answered, rushing out of the office. After picking up Ethan and finishing some shopping, they returned home just after 5 p.m. As she prepared dinner, Sarah prayed that tonight would go well. At 6:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. Sarah took a deep breath and headed to the front door. Opening it, there stood Margaret. In her mid-60s, she wore a neat two-piece outfit with her permed hair neatly styled. "Good evening, Margaret," Sarah greeted with a smile. "Good evening, Sarah," Margaret answered with a slightly stiff expression. "Sorry I'm late. The traffic was terrible." Sarah ushered her mother-in-law into the house. "Don't worry about it. Dinner will be ready soon." As they entered the living room, Ethan came running. "Grandma." Margaret's expression softened. "Ethan, happy birthday. You're 3 already." She handed over a large package. "Here's your present." Ethan's eyes sparkled as he received the package. Seeing her son's joy, Sarah felt some of her tension ease. "Can I open it?" Ethan asked. Sarah hesitated a bit, but when Margaret said, "Of course," she gave permission. Ethan quickly tore off the wrapping and took out the contents. It was an intricately made wooden train set. "Wow! Amazing!" Ethan shouted with glee. Sarah was impressed too. "What a lovely present, Margaret." "Thank you." Margaret looked a bit proud. "Old-fashioned toys are the best. None of that electronic gadgetry nowadays." Sarah was about to say something when Michael returned from work, so she held her tongue. "I'm home," Michael called from the entrance. "Welcome back, dear," Sarah answered. As Michael entered the living room, Margaret stood up and embraced her son. "Michael, good to see you home." The whole family gathered in the living room, looking at Ethan's new toy. Sarah returned to the kitchen to finish the last of the cooking. Suddenly, an unusual sound was heard from the living room. Then, Michael's panicked voice rang out. "Sarah! Come quick!" Sarah rushed back to the living room. The scene she saw there froze her in place. Ethan had collapsed on the floor. His face was blue, and he was coughing violently. "Ethan!" Sarah cried out, rushing to her son's side. Michael said in a panic, "What happened? What's going on?" Margaret stood stunned, with a bewildered expression. "I don't know. He was just playing with the toy." Sarah tried to lift Ethan, but her son's body was rigid. "An ambulance! Call an ambulance," she shouted. Michael quickly jumped to the phone. "Hello, it's an emergency. Our 3-year-old son." Sarah desperately spoke to Ethan. "Ethan, hang in there. Mama's here. It's going to be okay." But Ethan's consciousness was fading. His breathing became shallow and irregular. Margaret said in a trembling voice, "Is it my fault? Did I do something?" Sarah had no energy to answer. All her focus was on her son. A few minutes later, the sound of sirens was heard. As the paramedics rushed into the house, they quickly began to assess Ethan's condition. "There's a possibility of anaphylactic shock," one paramedic said. "We need to transport him to the hospital immediately." Sarah, though dazed, gripped Ethan's hand tightly. "I'm coming with you," Michael said. "I'll follow in the car," and told Margaret, "Mom, come with me." Before getting into the ambulance, Sarah's eyes met Margaret's for a moment. Her mother-in-law's eyes were filled with fear and guilt. As the ambulance drove off, Sarah gazed at Ethan with a prayerful feeling. Why did this happen? Why so suddenly? Her head was full of questions and anxiety. On the way to the hospital, Sarah tried desperately to maintain her composure. However, a violent storm of emotions was swirling inside her. Why had today, which was supposed to be a birthday celebration, turned into such a nightmare? As the ambulance sirens blared, Sarah clutched Ethan's tiny hand. She watched intently as the paramedics administered emergency treatment to her son. "We're almost at the hospital," one of the paramedics said. Sarah could only nod. Upon arrival at the hospital, Ethan was immediately rushed to the emergency room. Sarah tried to follow but was stopped by a nurse. "Please wait here. The doctor will examine him." Sarah walked to the waiting room on shaky legs. There, she encountered an unexpected person. "Sarah." Turning around, she saw Dr. David Thompson, her childhood friend, standing there. "David!" Sarah exclaimed, her voice a mix of surprise and relief. "What happened?" David asked with concern. Sarah explained the situation, tears welling up in her eyes. David listened intently with a serious expression and said, "I understand. I'll go check on him right away," before heading to the emergency room. Time seemed to pass excruciatingly slowly for Sarah. Eventually, Michael and Margaret arrived at the hospital. "How is he? How's Ethan?" Michael asked, out of breath. Sarah shook her head. "Still nothing." Just then, David came out of the treatment room. "Sarah, I need to talk to you." The three listened to David with tense expressions. "Ethan is stable now. However, we're not clear on the cause of his symptoms. It's likely an allergic reaction, but we can't identify the specific allergen." "Allergies?" Michael exclaimed in surprise. "I've never heard of Ethan having any allergies." Sarah also looked confused. "I didn't know either." David continued, "We need to run more detailed tests. He'll need to stay in the hospital tonight for observation." Sarah couldn't hide her distress. "Can we see him?" "Ethan?" "Of course," David answered gently. "But please keep it brief." Entering the hospital room, they found Ethan sleeping in a small bed. Seeing him connected to IVs and various machines, Sarah felt her chest tighten. "Mama's here, Ethan." Sarah gently stroked her son's hand. Michael also stood by his son's side, watching him silently. Margaret stood in the corner of the room, wearing an apologetic expression. David entered the room again. "We'll run allergy tests first thing in the morning. Until then, he needs to rest." Sarah nodded. "Thank you, David." As the night wore on, Sarah refused to leave her son's bedside. Michael and Margaret took turns going for breaks. Late at night, David came to check on them again. "Sarah, you should get some rest." Sarah looked up at David with tired eyes. "But Ethan." "It's okay, the nurses are watching him constantly," David said gently. "You need to recover your strength too." Sarah reluctantly agreed and lay down on the sofa provided in the room. However, she found it hard to fall asleep. Listening to her son's breathing, she reflected on the day's events. Why had this happened? And what would happen from now on? Anxiety and fatigue enveloped her. As the morning sun began to shine through the hospital room window, Sarah woke up. For a moment, she was disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, but quickly remembered yesterday's events. Ethan was still sleeping. Sarah gently touched her son's forehead to check his temperature. At that moment, Michael entered the room. His expression was a mix of exhaustion and anger. "Sarah, we need to talk," Michael said in a low voice. They stepped out into the hallway. Michael took a deep breath before speaking. "Why didn't we notice Ethan's allergy?" Sarah looked at her husband in surprise. "I didn't know either. There were no signs before this." "Didn't you check Mom's gift?" Michael's voice was full of accusation. "But it was just a toy," Sarah tried to explain. "How could there be allergens in something like that? It's about our child." "We should have been more careful," Michael said firmly. Sarah was at a loss for words. Indeed, perhaps they should have been more cautious. A feeling of guilt gripped her heart. At that moment, Margaret approached. Her eyes were red and swollen as if she had been crying all night. "It's my responsibility," Margaret said in a trembling voice. "I bought that toy." Sarah looked at her mother-in-law. Margaret's guilt was evident, but at the same time, anger was growing inside Sarah. "But Margaret," Sarah said quietly. "You know Ethan well. Shouldn't you have checked if there was anything dangerous?" Margaret's face contorted. "You're the mother. A child's safety is the mother's responsibility." A heavy silence fell between the three. Each was trying to shift blame while not wanting to admit their own fault. Sarah took a deep breath. "What's important now is Ethan. We can deal with blame later." Michael and Margaret looked dissatisfied but agreed. Returning to the room, they found Ethan awake. "Mama," he called out in a weak voice. Seeing her son, tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "I'm here, Ethan." Sarah held her son's hand. Michael and Margaret also approached, but kept their distance from each other. The rift that had formed in the family didn't seem easy to mend. As Sarah gazed at her son's face, she felt at a loss for how to overcome this situation. The afternoon after Dr. David gave permission for Ethan to be discharged, as his condition had stabilized, the family left the hospital. A heavy silence filled the car. In the back seat of the car driven by Michael, Sarah held Ethan close. Margaret sat in the front passenger seat, silently staring out the window. "When we get home, let's make sure he gets plenty of rest," Sarah said quietly. Michael just nodded. His expression still showed a mix of anger and anxiety. As they arrived home and Sarah carried Ethan towards the front door, she stopped in her tracks as soon as she opened it. A strange man was standing in the living room. "Hello, Johnson family," the man said, showing his ID. "I'm Detective Brown. I'd like to ask you a few questions." Sarah was too shocked to speak. Michael stepped forward and asked, "What's this about?" Detective Brown carefully chose his words as he began to explain. "We received a report from the hospital. We need to investigate the cause of your child's injury." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "You don't mean, you suspect abuse?" The detective continued without changing his expression. "We need to confirm the situation, including that possibility." Michael, barely containing his anger, said, "That's ridiculous. We cherish our child." Sarah, though shaken, sat on the sofa still holding Ethan. Margaret stood silently in a corner of the room. Detective Brown began asking questions politely but in detail. About Ethan's daily life, family relationships, and the events of the incident day. Sarah and Michael desperately tried to explain, but sometimes stumbled over their words due to confusion and fatigue. At that moment, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Margaret said softly, heading towards the door. Surprisingly, it was Dr. David standing there. "Hello," David said as he entered the room. "I came to check how things were going." Detective Brown frowned. "And you are?" David introduced himself and explained that he was Ethan's attending physician. He seemed to understand the situation when he noticed the detective's presence. "Detective," David said with a serious expression. Ethan's symptoms were clearly due to an allergic reaction. There are absolutely no signs of abuse. Detective Brown listened to David with interest. David explained in detail about Ethan's symptoms and their cause from a medical perspective. And, David continued, the test results show that Ethan has a rare wood allergy. It was probably triggered by the wooden toy he received as a birthday present. Sarah and Michael looked surprised. Margaret covered her mouth with her hand, unable to hide her shock. After thinking for a moment, Detective Brown slowly stood up. "I see. It seems the suspicion of abuse has been cleared. Thank you for your cooperation." After the detective left, a sense of relief filled the room. However, at the same time, new questions had arisen. A few days after the police incident, Sarah's family was once again gathered in Dr. David's office. This time, Margaret was also present. David began speaking with a serious expression. "Actually, there's something that concerns me about Margaret's recent behavior." Sarah and Michael exchanged anxious glances. Margaret sat uneasily in her chair. There are signs of early-stage dementia, David said quietly. A heavy silence fell over the room. Margaret said tearfully, "Is that so? I've been so forgetful lately." Sarah took her mother-in-law's hand. "Margaret," David continued, "it's likely that forgetting about Ethan's allergy was also due to these symptoms." Michael let out a deep sigh. "So that's why the wooden toy." Margaret apologized through her tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant to put Ethan in danger." Sarah embraced her mother-in-law. "We understand. I'm sorry for blaming you." Michael also approached and placed a hand on his mother's shoulder. "I'm sorry we didn't notice, Mom." David, watching the family, said quietly, "It's fortunate that we caught this early. With proper treatment and support, we can slow the progression of symptoms." Sarah said with determination, "We'll support Margaret as a family." Michael nodded. "That's right. Mom, let's get through this together." Margaret repeated words of gratitude while wiping away her tears. That night, the family had dinner together for the first time in a while. As they sat around the table, they discussed their future life. "Margaret, how about living with us?" Sarah suggested. Margaret answered with surprise, "But I'd be a burden." Michael said, "It's okay, Mom. We're family." Ethan chimed in with an energetic voice, "Grandma, let's live together." Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes. "Thank you, everyone." As Sarah looked around at her family, she thought about how this ordeal had made them a stronger, more understanding family. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. But Sarah was certain that with mutual care and understanding, they could overcome any difficulty. On a Saturday morning, 1 month after that tumultuous day, Sarah was making pancakes in the kitchen. From the living room, she could hear Ethan and Margaret laughing. "Grandma, which color should we use next?" Ethan's cheerful voice rang out. "Let's see, how about blue?" Margaret answered gently. Sarah smiled as she transferred pancakes from the griddle to a plate. Since Margaret had moved in, the house had been filled with a warm atmosphere. Michael, while making coffee, came close to Sarah. "Mom seems to be doing well lately." Sarah nodded. "Yes, it's thanks to everyone working together to care for her." To slow the progression of Margaret's dementia, the family had created a schedule, incorporating medication management and cognitive training into their daily routine. Ethan, too, while enjoying time with his grandmother, naturally played a supporting role. "Breakfast is ready," Sarah called out, and Ethan came running. "Yay, pancakes!" Ethan's eyes sparkled. Seeing her son growing healthily without allergy concerns filled Sarah's chest with relief. Gentle smiles adorned the faces of the family gathered around the dining table. Having overcome difficulties and deepened their understanding of each other, their bond was now stronger than ever. As Sarah looked around at her family, she thought to herself, "This is our new normal. There are challenges, but we can overcome them together. Yes, this family would surely be all right." Sarah I am Sarah Johnson, and I've spent 35 years of my life in a small New England town. Married for 7 years, I work at Sweet Memories, the bakery that my husband John's family has run for generations. The aroma of freshly baked bread wafting through the air early in the morning and the warm conversations with regular customers have become part of my daily routine. Good morning, Sarah. The smell of cinnamon rolls is heavenly as always. Mrs. Clark's voice makes me turn, and her smile warms my heart. The kindness of the people living in this town has become my emotional support, especially during the days when I struggle with infertility. We started trying for a baby in our 2nd year of marriage, but we haven't been blessed yet. Tests revealed that due to my physical condition, getting pregnant would be difficult. My husband John says, as long as we're happy together, that's all that matters, but I can't shake off the guilt of not being able to produce an heir for the long-standing family bakery. The only one who knows about this struggle is my sister-in-law, Lisa. We've known each other since high school, and she's always looked down on me since I entered on a scholarship, coming from a less affluent background. Surprisingly, she ended up marrying my brother Tom. Sarah, you're really useless, aren't you? You can't even give birth to an heir. Lisa's words still ring in my ears. She boasts about having given birth to her son Jason and continues to look down on me. On the other hand, my brother Tom has found success as a businessman working for an international company. However, the price he pays for this success is limited time with his family. With frequent long overseas business trips, his relationship with his wife and child seems to be growing distant. Sarah, Tom's going on another business trip. This time for 3 whole months. Lisa's discontented voice fills me with mixed emotions every time I hear it. I understand her loneliness, but I feel uncomfortable with her tendency to fill that void by tormenting me. Lisa's personality was likely shaped by the pampered environment she grew up in. She has a strong desire to always be the center of attention and even takes pleasure in others' misfortunes. When she learned about my infertility struggles, she began using that knowledge as a weapon to mentally corner me. Sarah, if I tell father-in-law about your infertility, you'll be kicked out of this family. She occasionally throws such threatening words at me. My father-in-law Mike is a kind, family-oriented person, but he can be strict when it comes to the issue of an heir. Lisa cleverly exploits this fact. Amidst these complex family relationships, I desperately try to maintain my place while going about my daily life. Taking pride in my work at the bakery, cherishing my relationship with my husband, and believing in the happiness that might one day come. Such days continued. And then, an event occurred that greatly shook this peaceful daily life. It was on a calm autumn afternoon, just as I was about to head home after finishing work at the bakery. My cell phone rang, and I hesitated for a moment when I saw the name displayed on the screen. It was a call from Lisa. Hello, Lisa. My voice carried a hint of tension. A call from Lisa was unusual and typically not a good sign. Oh, Sarah. Perfect timing. Hey, I have a favor to ask. Lisa's voice sounded rushed, unlike her usual haughty tone. Did something happen? Well, I have a sudden errand to run. Could you take care of my dog? I was surprised. I had never heard that Lisa had a dog. A dog? Since when did you have one? I don't have time for detailed explanations. Just go to the house and feed it. The key is in the mailbox. Lisa's words were hurried, and I got the impression she was hiding something. However, feeling the responsibility of caring for a living creature, I hesitantly agreed. All right. I'll go. Thanks. I'm counting on you. After the call ended, I was filled with mixed emotions. Lisa's attitude was different from usual, and I had a suspicion that there might be something more to this. However, if there really was a dog, I couldn't ignore it. When I returned home, my husband John had already arrived. I told him about Lisa's request while he was preparing dinner in the kitchen. I got a call from Lisa. She asked me to take care of her dog. John furrowed his brow. I've never heard of Lisa having a dog. I thought the same thing. But I can't ignore it if it's about taking care of an animal. John placed his hand on my shoulder. I understand your kindness, but I'm a bit worried considering your relationship with Lisa. I let out a deep sigh. I know. But if there really is a dog and I didn't take care of it, my conscience wouldn't allow it. John thought for a moment, then slowly nodded. I understand. But if anything happens, call me immediately. I'll come right away. Those words made me feel stronger. With my husband's support, I felt I could handle any situation. Thank you, John. It'll be fine, I'm sure it's just taking care of a dog. Even as I said this, anxiety was swirling in my heart. As I prepared to go to Lisa's house, I questioned whether this decision was right many times. However, the thought that a creature's life might be at stake strengthened my resolve. I'm going now. After giving John a quick kiss, I set out for Lisa's house. While driving, various scenarios ran through my mind. The journey to Lisa's house is only about 15 minutes, but during that time, my anxiety continued to grow. It'll be fine, I reassured myself as I drove towards Lisa's house. At this point, I had no idea that this decision made out of goodwill would drastically change my life. Upon arriving at Lisa's house, the air in the quiet residential area felt strangely heavy. As I stood at the entrance and took the key from the mailbox, my hand trembled slightly. The moment I inserted the key and opened the door, a strange odor hit my nose. What's this smell? It was a mix of the stench of rotting garbage and some indescribable unpleasant odor. As I stepped into the entrance, darkness and silence enveloped me. Hello? Is anyone there? There was no response. As I cautiously moved down the hallway, I saw scattered clothes and trash on the floor. There were marks on the walls as if something had rubbed against them, and furniture was arranged haphazardly. This scene was completely at odds with the meticulous personality I knew Lisa to have. When I stepped into the living room, what met my eyes was a scene beyond imagination. Jason. In the dimly lit corner of the room, a small figure was huddled. As I rushed over, I found Jason lying there, emaciated and wearing dirty clothes. His eyes were vacant, and I could see he was barely breathing. Jason, are you okay? Can you hear me? It's Auntie. I desperately called out to him, but Jason barely responded. His body was skinny, his hair was tangled, and his clothes were dirty. And beside him, this is empty milk bottles and jars of spoiled baby food were scattered around. These were traces of meals unsuitable for a 5-year-old child. What surprised me even more was the envelope placed next to them. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and found several photographs inside. They showed Lisa in intimate poses with an unknown man. A hotel receipt was also enclosed. Could it be Lisa? Faced with evidence of an affair, I was at a loss for words. However, this was not the time for that. Seeing Jason struggling to breathe in front of me, I came to my senses. It's okay, Jason. Auntie will help you. I picked Jason up. His body was surprisingly light, and I could feel his bones protruding. There was no time to hesitate. I had to take him to the hospital immediately. As I put him in the car, Jason let out a small moan. That sound tightened my heart. It's all right now. Auntie is here with you. As I said this, I strengthened my resolve. I can't ignore this. Even if Lisa becomes furious, I will protect Jason. With this vow in my heart, I drove towards the hospital. When we arrived at the hospital's emergency room, the medical staff immediately took Jason to the treatment room. I waited in the waiting area, feeling overwhelmed with anxiety and impatience for the diagnosis results. Mrs. Johnson. After about an hour, a middle-aged doctor in a white coat approached me. Yes, that's me. How is Jason's condition? The doctor began explaining with a serious expression. Jason's condition is extremely critical. In addition to severe dehydration and malnutrition, we can see bruises all over his body. Moreover, there are significant signs of long-term psychological stress. Hearing these words, I was at a loss for words. The situation was more serious than I had imagined, and my chest tightened. What's the outlook for his treatment? The next few days will be crucial. He needs 24-hour observation in the intensive care unit. To be honest, recovery will take time. As I listened to the doctor's words, anger and sadness welled up inside me. How could this happen? By the way, are you his guardian? I hesitated for a moment at the doctor's question. No, I'm his aunt. I'm trying to contact his parents, but... As I said this, I decided to call Lisa. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number, and after a while, the call connected. Hello, Lisa. Oh, Sarah. How was taking care of the dog? Lisa's voice had returned to its usual arrogance. I took a deep breath, trying to calmly explain the situation. Lisa, listen. Jason has been taken to the hospital. He's severely malnourished and... Huh? What are you talking about? I just asked you to take care of the dog. I was stunned by Lisa's response. Lisa, when I went to your house, Jason was collapsed. He's in the intensive care unit now. Stop joking around. That can't be true. Panic began to mix into Lisa's voice. Lisa, this is not a joke. Jason's life is in danger. Come to the hospital immediately. After a moment of silence, Lisa hung up. When I tried to call back, it seemed her phone was turned off. I let out a deep sigh. Lisa's cold response filled me with anger and sadness. However, now I need to prioritize Jason. Next, I called my husband John. After briefly explaining the situation, John said he would come to the hospital right away. Sarah, don't bear this burden alone. I'll be there soon. John's words calmed me a little. However, there was still something else I needed to do. Taking a deep breath, I dialed the next number. Hello, father-in-law. It's Sarah. I'm terribly sorry, but there's an urgent matter. As I explained the situation to my father-in-law Mike, my resolve solidified. We need to come together as a family to protect Jason, even if it means damaging my relationship with Lisa. After hanging up, I stood in front of the treatment room again. Looking at Jason's small body through the glass, surrounded by IVs and medical equipment, I quietly spoke to him. Hang in there, Jason. Auntie is here for you. I couldn't imagine the difficulties that lay ahead, but I vowed in my heart to protect this child. As I felt this, I sensed the beginning of a long night. As I waited in the hospital corridor, I heard hurried footsteps approaching. Turning around, I saw my husband John and father-in-law Mike rushing towards me with worried looks on their faces. Sarah, are you all right? John embraced me. How's Jason? Mike's voice lacked its usual calmness. I explained the situation to them in detail. Jason's condition, Lisa's strange behavior, and the evidence of the affair I had discovered. After I finished speaking, Mike's face had turned red with anger. Does Lisa have anything to say for herself? Mike asked in a low voice. I can't get in touch with her. She hung up and... At that moment, a nurse approached us. Mrs. Johnson, the patient's mother has arrived. Turning around, I saw Lisa standing there. Her eyes were red, and her makeup was smeared. What happened? My baby. Lisa pleaded in a tearful voice. Mike stepped forward and spoke in a stern tone. Lisa, explain yourself. Why did you leave Jason in such a state? Lisa flinched for a moment but quickly began to make excuses. I was desperate too. Tom is never home, and taking care of Jason is so hard. That's no excuse for abusing a child. John raised his voice. Lisa continued, tears streaming down her face. I was under so much stress. I just let my guard down for a moment. But I love Jason. Really. Those words made anger well up inside me. You love him. In that state. And what about the evidence of your affair? Lisa's face turned pale. What do you mean? There were photos of you with an unknown man next to Jason. Lisa was at a loss for words for a moment but quickly began making excuses again. Oh, that. He's just a friend. Jason must have Stop lying. Mike's voice echoed through the corridor. A nurse approached and asked us to be quiet. After that, we moved to a small conference room in the hospital to hold a family meeting. Mike opened his mouth. First, we need to contact Tom. John nodded and took out his smartphone. It'll be an international call, but I'll make it right now. While we were trying to contact Tom, we discussed how to proceed from here. We agreed that Jason's treatment and recovery were the top priorities, that legal action might be necessary against Lisa, and how we as a family would overcome this crisis. During the discussion, Lisa sat silently. Her expression seemed to be a mix of fear and regret. It was 30 minutes later when we finally got in touch with Tom. After hearing the situation, Tom promised to arrange his return immediately. As this long day drew to a close, we were all exhausted, but one thing was clear in our resolve: to protect Jason and restore our family bonds. That would become our mission from now on. Tom returned to the country 3 days after Jason was hospitalized. He rushed to the hospital looking tired and stood by Jason's bedside. How did it come to this? Tom's voice was filled with deep sadness and self-reproach. We gathered in the conference room again and explained the course of events in detail. Tom listened silently, but his expression gradually changed to anger. Lisa, explain yourself. Why did you put Jason through this? Tom's voice was low, filled with suppressed anger. Lisa began to speak through her tears. I didn't mean for this to happen. But you're always work. You never understand how I feel. That's no excuse for abusing a child. Tom raised his voice. And what about those photos? Lisa fell silent for a moment, then answered in a small voice. That person is a colleague from work. Just a friend. Stop lying. Mike shouted. There was even a hotel receipt. Lisa's shoulders slumped, and she finally admitted the truth. I'm sorry. I was lonely. But it was really just a momentary mistake. Tom let out a deep sigh and held his head in his hands. Why did Jason have the photos? Lisa answered in a trembling voice. Jason. I found him rummaging through my bag. I yelled at him. Then he ran away with the photos. At that moment, we all understood the same thing. Jason had become the target of abuse because he discovered his mother's secret. As silence dominated the room, I gathered my courage to speak. I think we should focus on Jason's recovery and rebuilding our family rather than assigning blame right now. John squeezed my hand, showing his support. Sarah's right. Let's put Jason first. Mike slowly nodded as well. You're right. We'll think about legal issues later. For now, let's focus on Jason's treatment. After a long silence, Tom quietly began to speak. Thank you, everyone. Especially you, Sarah. If it weren't for you. He choked up. I smiled back. We're family. With those words, the atmosphere in the room seemed to soften a little. Lisa, sobbing, whispered. I I want to start over. For Jason, for our family. Tom looked at Lisa with a stern expression. I can't forgive you easily. But for Jason's sake, we need to overcome this as a family. Mike stood up and, looking out the window, said, This will be a long journey. But with family bonds, we can surely overcome it. We all quietly nodded at those words. Overcoming this ordeal and becoming a stronger family. And above all, restoring a happy childhood to Jason. This became our new mission. As we left the conference room, John put his arm around my shoulders. Sarah, your courage and love have saved this family. I couldn't hold back my tears at those words. The road ahead won't be easy. But with our family bonds, I'm sure we can overcome it. Believing this, I started walking forward. Several days after the family meeting, we were faced with a crucial decision. Whether or not to take legal action against Lisa for the sake of Jason's future. In the hospital corridor, Tom approached me. Sarah, I want to hear your opinion. Do you think we should press charges against Lisa? I took a deep breath and chose my words carefully. Tom, to be honest, I'm torn. What Lisa did is unforgivable. But I wonder if criminal punishment is really in Jason's best interest. Tom nodded quietly, gazing out the window. I understand. I'm struggling with the same dilemma. In the end, we decided to go through family court to mandate counseling and parenting education programs for Lisa. We chose to prioritize family restoration over criminal prosecution. The next challenge was Jason's custody. Tom and Lisa were going to separate, and we needed someone to temporarily take care of Jason. At a gathering of the whole family, Mike made a suggestion. Sarah, John, would you two be willing to take care of Jason? John and I looked at each other in surprise. But I began to say, when John squeezed my hand. Let's do it, Sarah. I'm sure we can do something for him. Tom was looking at us with a serious expression. Please, Sarah. I believe you two can make Jason happy. Those words spread warmth in my heart. So this is what family means. All right. We'll do our best to take care of Jason. A few weeks after that decision, Jason moved into our home. There were some awkward moments at first, but Jason gradually opened his heart to us. One night, just before bedtime, Jason timidly asked me, Auntie, is it okay for me to be here? Tears welling up in my eyes, I gently hugged Jason. Of course, Jason. You can always be here. You're our precious family. Hearing those words, tears glistened in Jason's eyes. As the days passed, our family bonds deepened. Lisa also began to change little by little, and during her visits with Jason, she started to interact with him more sincerely. Tom adjusted his work schedule to return home as frequently as possible. I felt deep respect for his efforts to prioritize family time. One day, while I was working at the bakery, John rushed in with an excited look on his face. Sarah, something unbelievable happened. What is it? I asked, and John answered with shining eyes. Jason laughed for the first time. A genuine smile. And he said, "Thank you," to us. At that moment, warmth flooded my heart. We had truly become a family in the real sense. And through this experience, I realized that I had grown significantly as well. While the struggle with infertility was still present, I understood that it wasn't everything in my life. A loving family, a cherished job, and irreplaceable Jason. All of these were enriching my life. With each new morning, my heart fills with gratitude. I've learned firsthand that family bonds can overcome any difficulty. 6 months have passed since then. Jason has become remarkably healthy and happily reports making friends at school. On a Sunday morning, we all went out for a picnic. Watching Jason run around innocently on the lush green grass, I savored the happiness. Tom and Lisa are also gradually mending their relationship. They attend parenting classes together, making sincere efforts. Amidst all this, an unexpected event occurred. I had been feeling unwell for a few days, so I went to the hospital for a checkup. The result was surprising. "Congratulations, Mrs. Johnson. You're 8 weeks pregnant." I placed my hand on my belly in disbelief at the doctor's words. A long-cherished wish had suddenly become reality. When I returned home and told John, he was so overjoyed that he hugged me and spun me around. "Sarah, really? Oh, how wonderful." That night, as I lay in bed, I quietly shed tears. Tears of joy and gratitude. Perhaps by saving Jason, we saved ourselves too. The importance of family love, the value of bonds, and the significance of maintaining hope. We learned all of these. Tomorrow, a new life begins again. There will surely be challenges. But I'm certain we can overcome them. I believe we can move forward, step by step, together with our beloved family. The morning sunlight streaming through the window seemed to promise a future filled with hope.